Moshe, 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 come to me. Elohim, 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 Abraham, Elohim, Yitzhak, Elohim, Yaakov. Welcome to another exciting edition of the Torah Watchman Show, going international. For all my brethren in Uganda and Andhra Pradesh, India, and elsewhere, yes. God bless these people. This is your humble host, none other than Rev Yar ben-Emmett, which means the inconvenient truth. I will always shoot from the hip. I always aim the target truth and nothing else but the truth. So help me God. Anyway, I hope everyone's been well. The title of this edition is The Killing Fields of Ukraine. Sounds pretty ominous, right? And yes, the context is what's happening between the Russian invasion of the sovereign nation of Ukraine and the valiant, heroic effort, supposedly, by the Jewish president. President Zelensky. So let me get started. There's something I found out. I'm sorry, me as a Jew, I have not really thought about in years. My wife mentioned it a few times, but it's not as significant in Hamashoah as Auschwitz is. You know, when you think about the Holocaust, you think about Auschwitz, right? Well, there's another major killing field in Ukraine known as Babi Yar. Yeah, Babi Yar. And I have not heard this term before. I have not heard it mentioned predominantly in Hamashoah or Holocaust International Memorial Day. But you know, there was an errant missile launched by Russia against a propaganda TV news communications tower right in Kiev, you know, the capital of Ukraine. Well, immediately when that TV station blew up and exploded and people died, unfortunately, since the Jewish memorial, Holocaust memorial, which is initially was, they cut the yellow tape for it this year. Yeah, very recently. They put I think a bronze statue of a menorah there. And then President Zelensky immediately accused Putin for targeting a Holocaust memorial there. But actually what happened is that the TV tower, the studio or broadcasting station, the whole building complex was demolished because of that. But I found out about 9 hours ago that someone reported that the memorial itself was not touched, was not damaged. So you go from being destroyed completely, Putin targeting Holocaust memorials, crimes against humanity, whatever. But let's get back to the history of what's happened in Ukraine leading up to this point. Again, the title of this Torah Watchman show is The Holocaust by Bullets in Ukraine. Now, a lot of my reference here is from a compelling article that I'm reading right now. This article in question was published online through the National WW2 World War II Museum out of New Orleans. And it's actually very current, January 24th of this year. The Holocaust in Ukraine represents the first phase of the Holocaust in which an estimated 1.5 million Jews were shot to death at close range in ravines, open fields, and forests. Incidentally, the Holocaust Memorial I just mentioned that was partially damaged or impacted negatively by the Russian missile to the Ukrainian capital TV tower, known as Babi Yar. But that was not the only killing field in Ukraine. Please stay with me. So, based on present-day borders, 1 in every 4 Jewish victims of the Holocaust were murdered in Ukraine. I bet a lot of you did not know that or think about Ukraine, of all places, where I'm talking about 1941, 1.5 million Jews were murdered in the country of Ukraine that's under dispute between Russia, NATO, the U.S., and other nations that are choosing sides right now. China is choosing predominantly the Russian Federation. The United States is choosing predominantly President Zelensky in Ukraine. But there's a compelling history here, okay? Now, before I get started any further, my wife's great-grandparents on her mother's side were murdered, and we believe, and we're not sure about this, in Belarus, okay? Moldov, Belarus, the city in that area, that district there, which is kind of northern Ukraine right now, which is an independent republic right now. They were from that area of the world. That's not too far from Babi Yar, close to the capital Kiev. Okay, so I'm gonna put something together here. I would have not even be discussing this topic about Babi Yar if it wasn't for the newsworthy story of an evil Putin missile striking premeditatedly and destroying a Holocaust memorial in Ukraine. Now they're saying Putin hates Jews for targeting something that had no combat significance at all. No, what he did, he targeted a TV news station that was creating propaganda and creating all kinds of problems for Russian military analysts and other people, combat readiness, troop morale, whatever. Okay, but anyway, it was destroyed, but thankfully the menorah, beautiful menorah there, big brass statue there, I've never been there, but I'll show you some pictures later on, was not destroyed. So we have here the history of the Holocaust, the summer and fall of 1941. Incidentally, this is where my wife's maternal great-grandparents were murdered. We suspect they were murdered late summer or early fall, probably between August and September, when her grandfather, Mates Agres, was conscripted into the Soviet military. He just got married, and he had his wife that he just married or engaged to. Her family came over there, and of course he sent out communiques during that time to his family so they could meet and greet for a festive, beautiful wedding ceremony, not too formal, because he was going into the military, and World War II was getting pretty hot during that time with the Germans and Nazi expansion over Europe. So anyway, he never heard. He never heard from his father, his mother, his little sister, and his little brother. He never heard of them again. His other two brothers went into the army, into the military, Soviet military, and fought various missions, whatever, in World War II. And they did some. One died immediately in 1941, I believe, and the oldest one, Mates's brother, I think probably a little bit younger than him. He lived a natural life and he survived World War II, Bolkashemba anyway. So there was these Nazi killing units that were coming and invading in Ukraine. Ukraine at this time was under general Soviet Union domination, but it was given local autonomy. It's kind of a loose federated country, very large. Ukraine is probably the largest country in Europe. So the Soviets started coming in from Germany with these SSS Nazi killing units, and they had the mission to shoot to kill any Jewish man, I believe, age 30, 35, or in that age group, because they thought they would be combat ready. They might fight against the Soviets. They may cause problems. But anyway, their primary mission was to ethnically cleanse Europe of all non-Aryan people. Okay, that's what it was about. So these Nazi units came in. They started shooting all adult males during the early invasion of the Soviet Union, expanding to include genocide and targeting women, children, entire Jewish communities. Remember, 600,000 children before the Holocaust ended in 1945 had been murdered. So in January 20 by 1942, top Nazi officials represented the Iraq authorities met in Wannsee, a suburb outside Berlin. At this meeting, they chaired by Reinhard Heydrich, and the Reich Security Main Office formed the extermination plan for the final solution to the Jewish question. This is by 1942. They already were planning building Auschwitz 1 and 2 and so on, 3, I believe. But remember, before this even happened, there was a lot of spot killings of Jews in different areas, and then there was also mass killings or murdering of Jews in Ukraine as well. Again, Ukraine encompasses a lot of real estate there, a lot of areas there. Essentially, what was happening is that these Nazi SSS soldiers, these killing squads, they went out throughout Ukraine. They went to the constable and people in Ukraine, different communities, different states within Ukraine. And, I don't see any evidence whatsoever, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Ukrainians at that time did not resist the Nazis. In fact, they actually conspired with them. Their police force, the Ukrainian army conspired because they didn't want anything to happen to them. They didn't want, the Jews, they did not have a very good relationship with them. Jews were left to their own. The Ukrainians were left to their own, and they didn't mix too well, okay? But anyway, when the Soviets came in and said, tell me where all the Jews are in Ukraine. Tell me which town has the most Jews, where the communities are. And they were rounding them up, and they were hand delivering these Nazis to the Nazis to be murdered. So there was before there's even one Auschwitz, before one formal gas chamber, crematory, whatever, they were rounding up Jews. They took them out of their homes, evicted them homes. They told them stories and lies and propaganda. Oh, you have to move into this new area. Okay, you need to move in this new town. Well, it's actually a ghetto. It's a holding area. And then they just put them on a march or whatever to some unknown location. And before they knew it, they stripped them of all their clothes. And this was a lot of elderly people, women, mothers, grandmothers, and children. They were shot to death and thrown into ravines and holes and things of that nature. So the mass shooting of Jewish victims in the summer and fall of 1941 represents the first phase of Holocaust. More Jews died, I would say, in Ukraine in 1941, singular, within the first few days. The highest percentage died there than any other place. I mean, the number of Jews that died there per capita, whatever, was higher than other nations. So this was happening in the summer of 1941. Incidentally, there's the same time frame in which my wife's grandfather on her mother's side lost contact with his parents in Belarus and Mogilev. So I'm gonna attach some maps so you can see how Ukraine is today in relation to the Russian Federation, and how it was during the 1940s, okay? So there's a lot of information here, different operations. I want to skip down a little bit. Just days before the invasion, Nazi leadership also issued a memorandum entitled Guidelines of the Conduct of Troops of Russia. They had some temporary agreements with the Soviet Union at that time over land. In fact, they had non-aggression early on. They reneged on it, but a non-aggression treaty to give portions of extreme Western Ukraine to the Soviet Union. So today, looking at the map, extreme west, Ukraine actually belongs to Poland. Okay. And I haven't heard anyone in Poland complain about that. So you have all these missions here. You have all these commanders giving orders to various battalions of Nazi troops. They were instructed to work with the locals. There were certainly more people in Ukraine that outnumbered the Russians and their troop carriers and soldiers that were marching through the cities and things of that nature. If they did not have help for the locals, folks, they wouldn't be able to round up all these Jews as quickly and efficiently they did. And yes, Ukrainians during that time, during the summer and fall, early fall, in 1941, they conspired with the Nazis to the end of murdering Jews. Okay. I am not being biased here. I'm quoting information that's historical in content. You can make your own decision after I finish this video and this documentary. You can compare what's happening in Ukraine today. Today, 180,000 Jews are left in Ukraine, predominantly, and they are actually qualified for Aliyah or refugee status to immigrate to Israel. And this is happening now. I think almost about 5,000 Jews have already left Ukraine and gone to Israel successfully. So in an order dated in July 11th, 1941, a commander of the police regiment and Valorous commanded that the Jews be shot on the outskirts of towns and villages to shield local residents from the sights and sounds of mass murder. So you hear about this distraction here. So in order to ease the impression today, the order also called for evenings of camaraderie to follow every mass killing incident, which typically included meals prepared by local residents, music, and drinking. So you think about this. You're murdering hundreds of people, and then you cover up what's going on that with some celebratory music and drinking and dancing. I mean, this is just as demonic and evil as you can imagine what was happening during that time. Okay, in the second half of July, orders for persecuting and murdering the Jews became more extreme, shoot-to-kill orders, essentially. Of course, the final solution was fully implemented by July 21st, 1944. There are many mass graves that were identified, and Nazis kept very meticulous maps at that time before they destroyed all the evidence when the Allied invasion happened. And they try to cover it up. There's not a lot of relics, per se, in Ukraine left, but there are mounds and things of that nature, and we have previous maps. So we pretty much know where all the major mass grave sites are in Ukraine. There's a lot of remains, ashes, bones, and remains of the Jewish people in the ground. I mean, with wildflowers and animals and everything else on top of that. Just think about this. All the fighting going on in Ukraine today with the Russians, all the so-called insurrection happening with the Eastern republics that want to be separatists and want to withdraw from all Ukrainian governance and join the Russian. There's a lot of things going on here, okay? And you try to figure it out as a Jew, like me, Hasidic, Orthodox, what is God's plan in all of this? There's a lot of people being killed, a lot of people being hurt, millions of people as refugees going into France from Ukraine. Other people are being forced to fight. Civilians are fighting in Ukraine. And what are they fighting for? They're fighting for sovereignty of Ukraine. And of course, Putin said this is all propaganda, and there's propaganda on both ends. The U.S. has propaganda. That's part of our strategy and addressing adversarial competing forces now in the world. We have propaganda artists and specialists. That's what they do. But anyway, Putin said, I want to denaziize Ukraine. Of course, immediately U.S. and Mr. Zelensky said this is mentally retarded, it's crazy, it's insane to say that we are a problem in Ukraine. Why are you talking about denaziize us? We're not Nazis, we're not affiliated with the Nazis whatsoever. Why are you saying this? I'm just describing to you, and historically, at the systemic level, at the root level in Ukraine, they have a history of conspiring with the well-trained Nazi SSS killing squads, okay, in 1941. Okay, so there's a holocaust of bullets before they had these efficient killing crematories and gas chambers, all the medical experiments and everything else, all that going on. So as an end result, on the end of July in 1941, 10,000 Jews from the Carpatho Ukraine area arrived in the Kamenets, Padilski, I apologize for my mispronunciation here. The nearest town across the Hungarian border, the influx of thousands of people put a strain on already limited housing situation. An army report from FK 183 described the quickly deteriorating situation. The numerous Jews were increased by the influx of Jews expelled from Hungary, of which 3,000 arrived in the last few days. Feeding them is proving enormously difficult. Danger of epidemic also exists. Immediate order for the evacuation is urgently requested. Of course, by August 25th, 1941, at this time is when my wife's maternal great-grandparents disappeared off the face of the earth, okay? Literally. So during a meeting between High Command of Army and the REC and military of the occupied Eastern Territories discussing the establishment of civil administration in the region, Frederick Jacqueline reported devised an ominous solution promising to liquidate these Jews before September the 1st, 1941. Okay, so again, establish some things here. Ukraine literally was a staging ground of the initial Hitler Nazi final solution to rid Europe of the plague of the Jewish people. Okay? Ukraine was a staging ground for that. There were literally a field of bullets, mass graves, as mass assassinations, and the local Ukrainians virtually did not do anything. I don't have any evidence at all when I'm doing this video and my research. I have no evidence whatsoever that these local armies in Ukraine resisted. There was no resistance force to the Nazis at all. I think the Nazis essentially left the Ukrainians alone. They wanted to be neutral to the Soviet Union, okay? But it wasn't just Jews that were rounded up. It was Romanian gypsies, and it was captured Soviets, Russians too. They were murdered as well, along with the Jews. So you're talking about a total of about 100,000 people lost their lives, and their bodies were buried and destroyed and everything else, burned and thrown in the ravine known as Babi Yar. So within literally 2 days, there were more than 33,000 Jews that were murdered in that area, Babi Yar, which is very close to Kiev, the capital in Ukraine. Again, I'm talking about primarily 1941. This is interest to me because my wife's family is still trying to find out what happened to her great grandparents. I mean, what happened to them? There's no bodies. There's no burial sites. When you mourn as a Jew and you have Yorkshire, you need to know what the approximate Hebrew date of death was. We don't know. On September 19, 1941, German forces entered the city of Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, and essentially to round up 160,000 Jews. There were about 100,000 Jews fled Kiev or were conscripted in the Red Army. So the only saving grace of the Jews in Kiev was to join the Red Army, the Soviet Union at that time. So the immediate pretext for the massacre in Kiev was a series of explosions in the Ukrainian capital caused by Soviet mines. Soviets, they knew the Soviets when they evacuated that area. Then Nazis come in, they put booby traps and things like that. It killed a lot of Germans. Of course, the Germans, instead of blaming the Soviets, they blamed the Jews for doing all these sabotage attacks against them, and they just another pretext to murder them. Wholesale slaughter of the Jews. September 29, 30, 1941, the guidance of the Einsatzgruppe, the SS German police units and their auxiliaries rounded up a significant proportion of Jewish population in Kiev, whoever is left, and took them to the ravine of Babi Yar, located just outside the city. That's where that iron missile strike from Russia occurred very recently, I think yesterday in recording this video. So a brief report summarizing events states that September 29th and 30th, this was the day in which 33,000 plus Jews were murdered and thrown in this ravine. This is by the order of the day of the Eastern Front, but again, Auschwitz, most people know what Auschwitz was or is. They still exist in Poland, but very few people talk about this. That very few people talk about the significance of the killing fields in Ukraine because it's not politically correct. Everyone blames the Germans. But the Germans are as fault as they are and as evil as the people allowed the Hitler to rise into power and to support him initially and everything else. World War One, World War Two, and all of this. You can blame Germany. Germany is a very easy country to blame and demonize. In fact, they're giving reparations right now to Holocaust survivors. God bless them for doing that. It's very humbling to do that and admit that you did wrong. Ukraine is the only country that has not really formally apologized before the UN and everything else, and denounced their behavior, denounced their conduct, denounced their ancestors for being part of the initial staging ground for the eradication of Jewish people. Approximately 1.5 million Jews were murdered in Ukraine in multiple mass grave sites. Okay? I could go on, but some comments here. Someone made a notation. I'll read you in quotes. There were people of every age, children, no people, that had been told together because they were going to be taken to work somewhere. Everyone needs a job, right? And that they should take some food and their children there to be with them. And would be nurseries to provide it for the babies. They're suckling babies on the breast. The Jews had sort of an armband to identify them. Yeah, that's very famous, right? And then they were told to undress, and they were thrown into the pits, and they were machine gunned to death. And they said that the atrocities and the magnitude of death that occurred in 2 days, more than 33,000 Jews murdered in this way. There were still bodies at night squirming and moving, huge piles and stacks of bodies and corpses there. And some people did not die right away. They were critically wounded. It's not Hamashoah. It's not International Holocaust Memorial Day. That's already passed. The only reason I'm talking about this is the significance I want to bring to attention again. Babi Yar, what it is historically and what it is now. Okay? We need to talk about this very seriously when you talk about Ukraine. Okay? I'm not here to demonize President Zelensky. You can make you can own judgments about him. But, he's essentially in a bunker right now, and he's telling civilians to go out there and sacrifice their lives to fight back Russia and to take back their country while he's safely in a bunker. He is a Jew, and he is a descendant survivor of survivors of the Holocaust. Okay, he's my brother. I don't agree with him politically. I don't take him very seriously, and I don't know. I don't know if he's a truth teller. I think he will do whatever he needs to say to survive. And I think essentially he'll throw the people in his country underneath the bus. I really think he's that way. If he would resign, I heard someone say this recently in a news outlet, not just my opinion. If he would resign and his officials would leave the country, then no one else would die in Ukraine. The armies would stop fighting the Russians stop fighting the Ukrainian armies. The bombs would stop falling. Okay? It's that simple. Ukraine has no air support. NATO is forbidden in Article 5 to interfere in this conflict with Russia because Ukraine, for whatever reason, since the Obama administration, even before that, going back 10, 20 years, they've asked for membership of NATO for mutual protection as a NATO country. NATO's rejected them because their government is corrupt. Their government is absolutely corrupt and morally inept. And because of that, even in the past 3 administrations, they stopped sending fund support for their military and everything else. I think Donald Trump gave some Stinger missiles, some Javelin weapons and things of that nature, and then some limited stuff. But there's not been a lot of financial support in Ukraine because of their government, their decision making there. And of course, President Vladimir Putin said enough is enough, that, there's ethnic Russians in Ukraine and there's ethnic Ukrainians there. And they all pretty much speak Russian. but they're culturally different and tribally different, ethnically different, from east and west. But the Russians and Russian citizens, Jewish citizens living in Ukraine, and said, "Please help us out. Please liberate us from this government. We've had enough of this corruption. We had enough of this stuff of our finances and economy and everything else. There's so much waste and corruption. We've had so much money given us to other countries. We're not going anywhere." Listen, there's so many complex things going on between this conflict in Ukraine and Russia right now. I am not an expert to comment. My wife came from that area of the world in 1992 when the Soviet Union fell. I just want to point out, very interesting discussion here that not enough people are talking about. The summer months of the 1941 mark a transition from uncertainty to certainty of the final solution that Hitler implemented. He needed a staging ground. He needed an experimentation on how to quickly and efficiently round up thousands of people at once and then murder them simultaneously. He had to have the cooperation. He had to have the cooperation of the locals there. I'm talking about the Ukrainian army and Ukrainian police. Again, we're talking about Babi Yar. There's a big menorah there. I'll show you pictures of this. Jews, or 50-50, I'm talking about this. No one was talking about Babi Yar until that missile came near it, okay? And it was used for political interest by Zelensky to demonize Russia, and it was not even destroyed. It's amazing. But I really think my family, my wife's family, I think I put together a jigsaw puzzle. I think they were probably among that 33,000 some Jews that were marched to their deaths in Babi Yar. That was the largest mass grave there. There are many others in Ukraine. I'll show you a map of them. But that was the largest one, by far, the largest killing zone in the entire Holocaust. That's what I heard. It's not my opinion. Where, they suddenly lost their death in just 2 days. In just 2 days. Listen, I don't want to get into politics too much. This is very personal to me. My daughter, Eliora, there's a blood relationship, soul relationship now. Her second paternal great-grandparents were murdered because of Ukrainian conspirators with a Nazi killing machine in Ukraine. And Ukraine was the staging ground for Hitler's final solution that led to 6 million Jews being murdered. What can we learn from our history? Listen, this is not about my personal opinion. I will qualify that when I do, but this is about facts and fiction. Understand your opinion now about what's happening in Ukraine. Why would Putin say, I want to denaziize the country? Well, it's full of white supremacists. How many blacks or colored people have you seen in their ranks in the army? I've not seen any. In fact, I heard a report on a Nigeria news outlet that said that blacks, refugees trying to leave Ukraine, were turned away at the border between Poland and Ukraine in favor of white refugees because they have quotas and limits how many refugees can go across the border at once in one period of time. Okay, it's a horrible situation. I hope the Jews use this as a sign of God to get out of Ukraine and all out of Israel, because I think the days of the Mashiach are coming very soon. God bless you. Y'all, ben-Emmett signing out. I hope you understand that I don't want to say anything hurtful to you. There's a lot of Jews that are arguing about this right now. In fact, my wife is having arguments with her family that absolutely hate anything to do with Russia and Putin. You have, hate evil, okay? But don't be biased through emotional supposition, but quantified through objective reasoning and a logical analysis before you make a final judgment. May God be our judge. May not we judge our fellow brother, but look at the fruit of the tree of their lives and then make a final determination for yourself. Signing out, y'all, ben-Emmett. Goodbye.
земли, командовали парадами.